How do you assess this apparent wobble over publishing the book after he'd been in the UK last summer? What could it be down to?
Well, probably members of his family having a little discussion with him and saying, particularly probably with an understanding of just maybe how ill at that stage the Queen was, and how, you think about it, what an effort it was for her to turn up on those two occasions at the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, and getting a real sense of what was actually happening within to the Queen. And he probably, as he'd always said, had a very special relationship with his grandmother, and presumably he felt that even he could realize that this would not be kind to her to have it published while she was alive. I still think there may have even been times after the funeral then he was feeling reluctant, but clearly once he got the book done and dusted, it was going to be a very hard, take a lot of persuading to stop the publishers finally deciding to go through with it. And clearly since the funeral, there's been some add-ons as well. So he's only created perhaps more of a problem for himself. So within the royal family, since it's now been published.
Well, yes, and that's an interesting thought as well. Then, because as the fallout and reaction continues, actually, do you think, from Harry's point of view, it would have been better if he had pulled the publication and we hadn't got this book, and actually it didn't cause all the waves that it's causing?
Yes, because. But obviously he feels that it was and when we hear the interview tomorrow night, he will justify why he's doing it, and said, he wasn't happy with their silence and felt he had to put his voice out there. But clearly this voice has taken at times a very eccentric turn with all the revelations, and some actually very complicated. The military revelations clearly have all sorts of implications. Not only sort of breaking the sort of unwritten rule about servicemen and women, not really revealing the really dark side, the nasty side of war, which we ultimately know means the killing of people. And normally it's down to, if you think back to the Second World War and Spike Milligan, but that's just an example of the sort of camaraderie, the funny stories that go with the horrors of war, the way that was, the lighter side. But in real terms, this is complicated, and you wonder why he's actually decided to do it. Is it to highlight the fact that he has always been a security risk because he was fought in Afghanistan, and he is having these discussions with the Home Office since they pulled his security? Or is it just to prove that he was a real man and did have an important part to play? So it feels to me a confused book on so many levels, and at times it's got the element of kiss and tell. Then there is some serious bits about relationship with his mother, but then he goes off into sort of Hollywood, California speak, which again leaves the reader confused.
Yeah, confusing, but I think that's a good summary. Does it speak to some level of anguish of perhaps somebody that has run out of options in terms of trying to seek reconciliation with his family, which seems to be what he talks about as the motivation in lots of ways, and telling his story and all of that? But is there anguish in there about somebody who's perhaps just a bit flummoxed as to what else he can do?
Well, yes, and he's now holed up in his $1 million villa over in California, and it's obviously in a small circle of friends. He's only listening to what they've got to say, and it seems to be firing him up to do sort of more outrageous things. And clearly, from a royal household point of view, no one's saying that it wasn't a perfect relationship and there aren't two sides to the coin. But clearly, with the royal household, they must be feeling, what do we need to do? Because even if they go back to him, the lack of trust between both sides now is evident for all to see. And the lack of trust between the two brothers, it is a Shakespearean tragedy that I'm not even sure William Shakespeare could have thought of, the way it's sort of panning out at the moment. And it's really sad to see two brothers who, when you see footage of them sort of even 10, 15 years ago, they look genuinely close and fond of each other and working as a team. Well, that is as far as happening. It's just not going to happen at the moment. And William is probably feeling within his right, it needs Harry to come forward to apologise for the harm he's done, not only to him, but other members of the royal family as well.
Yeah. The front of the Daily Express this morning, King, all Harry has to do is call me. Loving father King Charles hopes son Harry will end his personal anguish by starting to reconcile their differences. Are you perceiving any movement on either side? Because it does still feel like something of a standoff by way of who will blink first, I suppose, by way of apologising and trying to meet somewhere on reconciliation.
Well, does the king wants Harry at the coronation because it's his big family moment. So there's got to be some movement, but in a sense, it probably has to come from Harry because he's the one who's created the storm, not the other side. Even though Harry would say it's the press briefings or whatever was alleged to have gone on that caused him to actually leave the royal family. So he believes that it's the royal household and members of the royal family who are at fault. But that's not going to solve the problem. If he wants to be there, and I think the problem is for Brand Sussex, where do they go from here? And if they're seen to be outcasts from the coronation, they are well and truly cut off from the royal family. What does that do to their brand? So they may have to look at commercial considerations and suck it up in a sense and say, we need perhaps to try and build bridges, because where are we going to go from here? Because we've caused so much hurt. And the reaction, I think, across great swathes of Britain is one of absolute bewilderment at what they're trying to achieve, because people may not like the monarchy, but at the moment it is the institution that defines our state. So here we go. I just don't know where it's going to go between these two, but Brand Sussex has a problem.